Hi Nick, thank you for joining me on the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm good. Nice to be here.
Yeah, thank you for joining me. With my guests, especially my musical ones, I go back to the start. So, when did you first take an interest in music, and when did you know you wanted to work in music?
I mean, I was sort of interested in music from like the age, well, really young, 3 or 4, I suppose, because my parents were into music. So there was always music in our house, and I was always kind of dancing around the place, doing musical impressions. Yeah, but it was always a bit of fun then. And then I was always in like the school plays. I was in the school choir. I was doing all that kind of thing. Um, and then got my first guitar at about age 10, I'd say. Yeah, it was 10. And that was kind of once because I've kind of started getting a bit more heavily into music. And once I had that first guitar and kind of held that first guitar, that was kind of that was it. I was suckered in. Yeah, it was kind of yeah. So really early, really young, and then started playing at a young age as well.
Was the production side of music something you were always interested in?
Yeah, I mean, I had mates who were into music. We go to gigs, and like they would always just kind of put the vinyls on, but I would always be reading them cover to cover. I was really interested in, who'd made the record, where had it been made, and kind of reading all that kind of behind the scenes stuff. Um, Obviously, there was no Google back then, so you couldn't get all that information. So it was about, reading a lot of music magazines and kind of reading a lot of books about it. And I was always interested in that side, kind of trying to figure out how records were put together, really, rather than yeah, or just listening like my mates would. I would be interested in kind of even when I went to gigs, you'd kind of I'd be interested in what production was going on, even though it was a lot less back then as it is now. But I was kind of really interested in that side of thing as well.
You started off working at Rockfield, the famous studios. How did that come about?
So by accident, really. I mean, if you grow up in Monmouth, it's a small town. Everybody knows about Rockfield. You're used to seeing kind of rock stars walking about the town. It was a normal thing. So yeah, I was aware of it, but I'd never been out there. My dad used to own a taxi firm in Monmouth, and he used to do a lot of the taxis for the studio. So he used to like pick up Robert Plant and people like that. So Robert lived in the area, so yeah, he was always picking up Robert, taking him home. So they knew my dad because he was always popping out there early hours to pick bands up and stuff. And yeah, a friend of mine was working there, and he left, and because he had a scholarship at a guitar institute in London, and he said, "I think you'd really enjoy the job." He knew I was into music; we'd kind of played in bands together, and he said, "I think you'd be really good at it. I think you'd really like it." But I'm 16 at this time, still in the middle of my GCSEs. Um, so yeah, it was an accident, and he said, "I'll sort it out for you." So he arranged an interview, and I went along on the Friday, which was my last exam actually, and finished my exam lunchtime. Went there for the interview, had the interview with Kingsley, and then I started on the Monday. It's all pretty mental. I was going to go to sixth form and do my A levels, and it just changed kind of overnight from planning out what I was going to do as a career with music as possibly a side. Obviously, I wanted to be in a band. I wanted to be kind of producer engineer, and hadn't really thought about it at that point. That was something I was maybe going to think about later. I was, yeah, just heavily into music at that point, but just more thinking about what am I going to do for my A levels, where am I going to go to university, that kind of thing. So, yeah, complete accident, and then got offered the job sort of on the spot because they knew my parents and I was local, and Darren, who'd been working there before, had recommended me. So yeah, I was in the door straight away.
One of the first bands you worked with was the Stone Roses on Second Coming. What was that
Yeah.
like? It was a long time, that wasn't it?
Yeah, because I mean, obviously, I was new to the business, so I didn't really know kind of how long records took and that kind of thing. So that when they booked in, um, Simon the engineer said to me, "Oh, they've booked in for quite a while. They've booked in for 6 weeks, so it's going to be a long session." And he said, "Yeah, that's kind of average now for a big band, 6 weeks to record and then a couple of weeks mixing." Um, and obviously that 6 weeks turned into 14 months. So it was, yeah, great to kind of, at Rockfield, it's like, the Big Brother house, you're kind of all living together and hanging out together and stuff. So getting to kind of spend that much time with a band like that, at that age, and just kind of take it all in and soak it all up, and all the people that you met through them, and yeah, great experience really. But there wasn't a lot of work going on. It was a pretty laid back 14 months. So, but that was my, like, to my advantage, because Simon just took the time to train me and to mentor me, because there was so much dead studio time, that he had so much time to go through it all with me and get me up to speed in Rockfield. And he let me bring my band into the studio, who were all Stone Roses fans. So we'd be, like, the drummer would be playing Rennie's kit, I'd be playing John's amps, and we'd be on Manny's gear, and so my band were like over the moon. And we'd just come in, jump on their kit, and record. And he'd just let me kind of record my own band, so that kind of I don't know, just kind of fast tracked me really to becoming an engineer, because there was so much dead studio time that I was just able to use the studio all the time and became used to the studio. And Simon Dawson was just brilliant for me to mentor me through that period. And I was kind of engineering pretty quick then. Bands were coming in, and within kind of, I don't know, 6 months, I was sort of engineering for smaller bands that came in and around the Stone Roses session.
You mentioned you was recording with your band? Is that the Hey Joe EP?
No, yeah, it is. Yeah. It was those guys. Yeah.
Is it a good EP? I haven't heard it, but is it good? Yeah, no.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're young kids. We kind of made it when we were all sort of 16 or something. So yeah, there's some all right songs in there. I play all right guitar on it, and yeah, we used to go to a studio in Herefordshire, owned by a friend of ours, Regan, and that was my kind of first introduction to a studio, recording in a proper studio with a producer there. We had great fun recording that EP, and yeah, that was the band. The band was called Bloom. So we kind of did really well around kind of South Wales and the Forest of Dean area. Got a bit of a following. The band was a bit mental, but yeah, that was. Hello, Joe. I mean, I saw it for sale somewhere the other day on someone's. I think there's a few of them on eBay for sale. I think for a reasonable amount of money. Yeah, so we did well, but yeah, it was them guys that also played a little while later played the football match with the Oasis boys and Nigel Kennedy. It was the same band, so we were obviously Oasis short of players, so it was my band and them versus the Nigel Kennedy band. Yeah, all local lads, all lads I'd gone to school with. My first band, school band kind of thing. So, yeah, it was great fun.
You mentioned with the Stone Roses it took 14 months. Why was that? Was it just so laid back that it just ended up taking a long time?
Yeah. I mean, that was their kind of, they had this kind of big budget to kind of spend on making an album. So they were gonna spend every penny of it, corporate money, major label money. So it was all about spending their money. Yeah, and they were trying things out and taking time off, and there was different versions of different songs on that record that they tried out. But a lot of the time, yeah, we were playing football down the pub. But yeah, but still, when they were on it and when they were in recording, just amazing to be up close to a band like that and watching them at such a young age when they were playing live together in the room. And you just used to sit in and watch Rennie play drums, and it just used to absolutely blow my mind. The guy, incredible. Just when you're watching him rehearse, just going through his kind of all his chops and stuff. Yeah, it was brilliant, amazing.
Yeah, he's a brilliant drummer. Is he the one, like, musician you've watched while you're in the recording studio that's you're in awe of, kind of thing?
Yeah, one of them, definitely. Yeah, he's up there. I just used to think like there was two drummers playing sometimes, because he has that kind of little under group going. It's amazing. And when you're obviously, I've been to gigs and stuff, but when you're in just a room and you're hearing a kit acoustically and you're 6 feet away, and he just used to let me sit in the corner and I'd just watch him. Yeah, amazing. Of course, he's just letting it go then. On the record, you're kind of restricted to what the song needs and stuff. But when he's just rehearsing, it was just, mind blowing.
that album doesn't really get the credit it deserves because of the first album. It was different one. It was more of a rock album, really. Uh, did the band always want to go a different direction with that album compared to the first?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that was what John was into at the time, and that was the direction he felt to, need going into. I think anyone now getting into music, if they listen back to that record, would say what a great album it is. I just think at the time, because of the departure from the first album, and when you've got a first album just laced with absolute legendary songs like the first album had, to follow that up is always going to be difficult. But I think when people listen now, and young bands I work with listen now, they absolutely love Second Coming. Um, they appreciate it more now because weren't around when the first record came out, so they appreciate Second Coming more. Yeah, I mean, great guitar riffs, great melodies, great lyrics. It's got everything again, that album. But yeah, how do you top that first album?
You mentioned there it's hard to top the first album. Did you feel like that with Oasis when they came in after Definitely Maybe?
Um, yeah, I mean, I was a big fan of the band by the time they came, because I met them when they were recording Definitely Maybe, but I didn't work on it. And then Definitely Maybe came out, and I was a huge fan. Um, Me and all my mates obviously loved that record, had it, played it to death. So when obviously the opportunity came to work with them on What's the Story, and they're coming in, you're thinking, well, how are they going to make a better album than that? And then you start to think, well, maybe it's not about making a better album. It's, how do you make an album as good, or an album that means something else? And I think from the beginning, when they came in and Noel sat there just running through the songs acoustically, and you're like, just blown away. I think you just kind of knew straight away it was just going to go to another level. The songs are more anthemic. The songs kind of, um, yeah, again, a departure from the sound of the first record and the kind of songwriting on the first record. But those songs, immediately when you hear them, you just kind of got the impression that they were going to be around for a long time and kind of etched in British music forever, really. And it was, yeah, and when you're playing 5 or 6 singles back to back, and they sound amazing just with an acoustic guitar and a voice, you know you're going to have a massive album, and especially off the back of such a big album, and the kind of the way the country was, the way music was, it was just the perfect time for it as well. That time at Rockfield, I was in the right place, right time. It was just every band was coming there. It was like every Britpop band, every indie band were going through there and just churning out hit after hit after hit. And Oasis were the kind of pinnacle of all that. And yeah, when he came with those songs for that album, you're just like, wow, this is just going to go to another level, and which it obviously did.
Yeah, it's a brilliant album. Well, they're both brilliant, Definitely Maybe and What's the
Yeah,
Story?
yeah.
I like Being Now as well. That gets a lot of shit, doesn't it?
It
But I think
does.
that's a good album.
It does. It's so bucket loads, and it's still a big album, and there's some absolutely amazing songs that most songwriters would give anything to be able to write.
Yeah.
Again, a slightly different departure, that kind of, over the top production, the wall of sound and everything. And sometimes maybe that masks what great songs are in there. And but you can't just keep doing the same thing. You've got this amazing songwriter with this amazing frontman and amazing band behind him. And yeah, trying out different things. I still love Being. I think there's some of their best songs are on that album. Um, it's classic, isn't it?
Well, you mentioned with the Stone Roses they had to follow up that first album. Oasis have got to follow up 2 albums, aren't they? So it's going to be even harder.
Yeah, that came, and obviously there was a big gap between the Stone Roses' first 2 records, whereas What's the Story followed definitely maybe up pretty soon afterwards. So it's a very short space of time. You got this band that have written 2 of the greatest albums of all time, 2 of the biggest selling albums of all time. So now kind of album 3 was their difficult album too, really.
Yeah.
Because Noel had so many songs already written. He had a lot of songs to choose from for those first two albums. So, and some he already had for like All Around the World was already about earlier as well. So he already actually had some of the songs for album 3, which is amazing. I never worked with a band or an artist where they're like, yeah, this is for album one, but this is for album two, this is for album three. You know, they've usually just got a collection of songs for that good enough just for that one album, let alone for the next couple. You know, and that guy had songs ready for the next couple of albums ahead. You know.
That's crazy, actually. So the Supersonic documentary, they're playing all around the world in like 1993 or so. It's weird that
Yeah,
it
yeah,
lasted for all that time, isn't it?
yeah. He used to say to me like, "Yeah, that's for album three because we need a 72-piece orchestra." So that's when we go to Abbey Road. You know, album one is this. Album two, we go to Rockfield and we do this, and it's kind of, But by album three, then we go bigger. To go bigger, we get the 72-piece orchestra. We go to Abbey Road, so that's why it was kept for that. That's what it needed, and that's what it got. Although we didn't record the orchestra in Abbey Road in the end, we did it in Air Studios. But yeah, that was his vision early on, and that's what happened. That's the step that it went, and that's where it ended up.
Have you seen any other musician like that that's got that vision and it came off like that?
No, no, none,
Crazy,
none.
isn't it?
It's usually musicians. They've got a song like that. They're like, right, that's going on the album now.
Yeah, first single.
Yeah, that's the first thing. That's it. Because they haven't got another 10 songs like that. They need a song like that to make the current album good. They're not. They don't have. Maybe some of them have got some unfinished songs that become songs later on. But that song was kind of there, finished, ready to go, and the vision was, no, we could put it on this album. It could have gone on What's the Story, but no, that's for album three. That's when we go even. That's when we go bigger. The sound and the kind of production and stuff. So doesn't happen. Doesn't I've never happened to bands I've worked with. No, doesn't happen.
Well, with What's the Story, Morning Glory, that took a lot less time than the Stone Roses album, did it? How long was that one?
What's the Story is pretty quick. So we did 15 songs in 15 days recording, which is amazing. Like, on budget sessions now, if we really have to at a push, we'll record a song a day. It's difficult to record a song a day, even with, kind of unsigned bands, independent bands. But just because of budget, sometimes we'll have to, and then you do the mixing afterwards. So for a band like that to record songs like that with the level of production that's on there and the level of vocals, without the aid of computers, because it's all analog, all on tape. So, editing or things like that, tuning's not possible, editing's not possible. So to do that to that level, a song a day, amazing. They were just on a roll though. They were a working method happened very quickly in a process of how we would do it, and they just stuck to that. And it was like, right, today we're going to record this song. Usually over they booked 6 weeks, but over that period you'd work on this song, and then you'd do a bit on another song. You might record all the drums, then all the bass, all the guitars, but this was like, no, today we're going to record this song. And by the end of the day, this song would exist. That piece of art that didn't exist before, obviously the song did, but that was it. By the end of the day, the vocals gone on. And we went back to those songs at a later date, so we kind of recorded nearly all of it. And then there was a couple of weeks of like adding production and kind of overdubs and things.
Is that the best work ethic you've ever seen then?
That session one is up there. I mean, there's bands that work really hard and bands that work really fast. There's artists that can only work fast. That's their way. They know they concentrate for that. They can't maybe concentrate over long periods of time. But I think, Oasis were definitely capable of that. But that was just, yeah, this is what we're going to do. We're away from everything. We got the songs. We know what we want to do. And it just kind of evolved naturally as well. It wasn't like completely organized and thought out. It was just, these are the songs we're going to go in, hit record. They obviously had production ideas between Noel and Owen and stuff, but it just kind of happened naturally and organically and very quickly. And yeah, I don't know if I'd see that kind of thing happen again, really.
No. Liam's voice on that album is unbelievable. Is it true it only take you like 1 or 2 takes to get it perfect?
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why we could record a song a day, because sometimes you can be half a day on a vocal, maybe a day on a vocal and backing vocals, but because Liam was so fast with the vocals, a couple of takes, you'd hit him at the right time in the day and he'd just go in and do it. And bearing in mind, they're fairly new songs to him. The lyrics are new, the songs are new, so he's got to try and get inside the song. He just knew what to do. He just knew how to sing Noel's songs and knew how to get it in his voice. It was just complete natural raw talent really on that record. He's just gone in, done it, and that's it. That's the vocal. Yeah, and Noel's backing vocals going down really fast because he's just great anyway. So yeah, that's the reason we were able to record it so fast, I think.
When he's singing the songs and he's got the lyrics, did Noel tell him sing it like not tell him how to sing it, but would he guide him with it, or would he just leave him to it fully?
It's a bit of both, really. Sometimes it would just go in and Noel would go, "That's it," and other times there would be guidance from Noel or Owen. I don't know. I don't know how much had gone on maybe behind the scenes with them running through it beforehand. How much kind of pre-production, how much. But I don't think too much really. I think it was more about on the spot, and yeah, it's a bit of direction from Noel, a bit of direction from Owen. And but when Noel's demoed, no, let Noel's putting a guide vocal down, and how Noel sang it was kind of how Noel wanted it to go. So Liam would just go, right, okay, just go in and do what he's done, but obviously in his style, and as he would say, better. So
That album changed their lives. Did it change your life as well?
yeah, yeah. I was I'm at Rockfield, which is like one of the most iconic studios in the world. So who knows? Had I not done that, maybe there would have been another band come along, would have taken another direction, still would be working with bands. But I think being involved in that from a young age definitely helped me, because I became kind of that guy that worked on those albums. So it made it easy for me to kind of market myself. I never did any marketing, but didn't need to really. But that association really helped my career, change my life. And just from a personal point of view, being involved in something so amazing, so iconic, it kind of, it does change you as a person, and kind of, was like, gave me the kind of energy and to kind of work really hard and forge a career for myself in the business. Learned so much from those artists at that time, being involved in all that Britpop era, and but especially from working with someone like Noel, learned so much, and Owen Morris as well. As crazy as he was, I still learned so much from him, and he taught me so much. So yeah, it definitely made it kind of easier for me to have a career. You still have to work hard, you still have to get good results, and you still have to get your head down and put the hours in. But I think, yeah, it definitely gave me a kind of like head start at a young age. I'm only like 18, maybe 18, 17, 18 on What's the Story, and then 19 when we started Be Here Now. So stupidly young, crazy young, because I started at 16 years of age. When I was with the Stone Roses, I was 16. So I was 3 years into my career by the time we got to Be Here Now, 3.5 years. But there was no training or university, so still doing my training really. But yeah, it was a bit of a head start for me. Definitely changed my life. And we're sat here now talking about this. I'm doing these things because of that. Yeah, I talk about other artists and other things that I've done, but the reason I get to do a lot of these things is because those albums are still some of the best albums ever made. Some of the biggest albums, still the biggest band around. So that's, people want to talk about it. It's like a moment, great moments in British music history. So, and I'll forever be part of that.
Well, you mentioned you were 18 when you were doing this Morning Glory. That's like every 18-year-old's dream, hang around with Oasis. What was that like? Just crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy. What's the Story was pretty chilled, really. It was, well, I wouldn't say chilled. In Oasis terms, it was chilled, because we worked kind of full on each day, and it wasn't a particularly long session. It was a couple of like 15 days. Then we had the break when they split up, and then we got back together for a couple of weeks and finished off the album. But yeah, it was pretty manic around that. But yeah, nothing compared to Be Here Now. Just hanging around with those. Yeah, there was like a few people would come to the studio, and there'd be a few parties doing What's the Story. And the attention they were getting from people when we went out, that was to be part of that. But and I thought that was pretty full on, because I'd not experienced being in that bubble, in that inner circle with a band like that. Obviously, I'm young, at this point, and had never kind of experienced being part of that. But that all paled into insignificance compared to the circus of Be Here Now and the craziness of Be Here Now. That level of press intrusion, that level of kind of fan attention, the parties, the kind of the guests, the people who were hanging around, the yeah, mental, crazy level. Another never seen anything like that, and never been involved in anything like that since. But since that Be Here Now stuff. So What's the Story was relatively calm. Calm and creative, really. It's more about the music. There were parties, of course they were, but yeah, it was Be Here Now was another level.
Well, we'll get on to being now soon, but with What's the Story? You mentioned they split up for a little bit and took a break. Did you think the album was shelved then? Where were you when he hit you with the bat? Were you there then?
Yeah. I mean, I just because I was there when the fight when it all kind of kicked off and started. Then I had to go down the studio to get out all the locals that he'd brought back, and we were smashing up the studio and Noel's guitars. So I had to kind of get them all out, get the studio secure, make sure the tapes were all right, get the studio locked up, and then I went back up then to kind of see what the hell was going on up there, and that's when it was all really kicking off. And then with the fight and the bat and everything, and then that was it. No headed off, and that was kind of band over. Album finished, band over, and kind of sat there the next day. Because Owen didn't know anything about it. He was just fast asleep for the whole thing. Woke up the next day, said, "Oh, what's happened here then?" I said, "Oh, there's been a bit of an accident. It's been a bit of an incident, and that's it. They've all gone. They've all gone home. That's it. It's finished." And I just remember his reaction was, "Oh, here we are then, boys. Should we go to the pub?" So, he phoned Marcus, the manager, and then we went to the pub for a bit. And yeah, we just kind of worked a bit on the record and for the next couple of weeks thinking, will they come back? Won't they come back? I think he worked on something else because the studio was booked and we were there. So I think he worked on some other stuff for creation, I think it was. And we waited, and then we got the word that they were gonna, it was all patched up, and they were coming back to finish the record. But nearly didn't get finished, nearly didn't get made, and that could have been the end of it, and we'd just be sat here talking about definitely maybe that's it. This iconic one album that this band made. So
how far off were they from finishing the album when that kicked off?
Well, I mean, we had about another 2 weeks of kind of production and overdubs to do. So the main tracks were done. So it could have been released at a later date, without at that point there was enough on there to make a record, but without a lot of the finishing touches, So yeah, it was quite far down the road. Yeah.
There's a Noel recorded Wonderwall on a wall outside, and you can hear the birds at the start of Hello.
Yes.
First track. Have you done anything else obscure like that that's a bit different?
Yeah, I mean, recording outside, especially somewhere like Rockfield, has always been a thing, really. The Beta Band used to come, and when I don't know if you're aware of the Beta Band, but they play, some of their tracks have two drummers. So Steve plays drums and Robin plays drums, the drummer and the singer. And we'd set them up outside, and they'd face each other, and they'd kind of set them in the courtyard so you can get this big kind of echoey drum sound out in the corridor. Out in the courtyard at Rockfield. So, and because there's no neighbours and no one around, so we were often recording something. And sometimes if it's a nice day, someone's like, "Oh, I want to record this outside." We get the birds, but because Noel had this song Wonderwall, and Owen just said, "Oh, you should go on top of the wall and do." So which he did. So I set him up on top of the wall. It's quite high up, and I got a chair and the mics up there. And it was actually for the guide tracks that he laid down.
Right.
That's the guide tracks, and so then the birds you can hear at the start of the album are the birds from the outtakes of Wonderwall. But we'd often record. I did a Sepultura record, and we recorded one of the songs in a castle in Chepstow. To get this kind of tribal drum sound with the kind of ambience of a big stone room in a castle. But yeah, it's not, this Rockford has all these little quirky places you can record things, like Zeppelin used to get the snare reverb from the corridor, from the kind of stairwell and things like that. Rockfield's got all those little kind of nooks and crannies, and I can do that. So that's what Rockfield's great at, is being able to be so creative and create your own kind of unique sounds using all the different spaces.
We've spoke about the fight with the cricket bat and stuff, and the studio getting smashed up and guitars and stuff. Is that the worst it's ever been there, or is there other bands that have come and it's kicked off like that?
That's the worst one, I'd say. Obviously, bands have arguments, bands have fights. There's been quite a lot of incidents, even going back 60s and 70s. Lots of incidences there. Kind of, yeah, the place is getting trashed. The old TV out the window kind of thing, and all that's gone on. But I think that was the kind of, yeah, that's definitely the most iconic incident and the kind of most significant and could have had the most impact, I think, on music, British music, if they hadn't got back together after it. But yeah, there's always that kind of stuff going on. Bands have fallouts, bands have arguments. But that was probably, I think, because there were so many people around and it just got so out of hand. In Rockfield terms, that's probably, yeah, the biggest kind of incident of that kind that they've had there.
We've spoke about beer now. I think Liam or Noel said, I think it was Liam said, when they went into the studio for beer now, that was the only time they could kind of shut off the outside world. Did it feel like that? Like,
Yeah, definitely. It was absolutely crazy for them at that period. I mean, you have to take your hats off unless you've been in that. People say, oh, they should just put up with it. It's part of being famous and all that stuff. Unless you're in the middle and thick of that and that intense kind of, it was just horrible. And I think you have to really take your hats off to them and how they dealt with it, especially Liam. Dealt with it amazingly. So when I see kind of celebrities kind of complaining about that kind of thing, and everyone saying, "Oh, they should just be grateful that they're famous and the attention because one day no one will," I think they were great. Of course, they were grateful for it and they loved the attention. But I don't think people quite realize, especially back then when things were even worse with the press than they are now. It's definitely got a bit better on that front now. As back then, everyone's phones were being tapped and rooting through bins and the intrusion. So yeah, it was horrendous, and it was there when they went in the studio. That was it. The doors were closed. It was a select few people in there, and we could just get on with making music. And the outside world, all that noise and for all that's going on around them, was kind of like shut out. And as soon as we got out the front door again, there it was, like paparazzi everywhere, fans everywhere. Whether it was outside the studio or following us in the cars or following us back to his house, or when we get to Liam's house, they'd be outside his house. And that was just 24/7, and he's a young guy with a family and stuff, and trying to make one of the biggest records of all time, and while still being Liam Gallagher. And it must, yeah, I mean, hats off to the guy, especially him. They all got it to a point, but Liam, another level. It was just carnage outside as soon as we left the studio. And, in the studio, people trying to get into the studio, people trying to break into the studio, people trying to nick tapes, people trying to get tapes to the Daily Mirror claiming they had tapes and all this kind of stuff. Just a constant headache every day, like making sure everything was locked away in the safe every night. I mean, I've never had to do that ever with another band, where everything has to be locked away every night in a safe and make sure no one else comes in the studio. But yeah, that was quite intense, that kind of responsibility for me as well. Because they would bring people back and there'd be parties in the studio. So I'd have to quickly make sure that there were no DAT tapes lying around or no lyric sheets, all these kind of things, because the press was so hungry for any little bit of information they could get. They had a lot of people on the payroll in places we were staying and things like that, so they could get information. They'd always approach us for information. But yeah, it was a tight unit. So yeah, pretty crazy time, all that going on. So yeah, the studio was definitely the haven to get away from all that stuff.
well, you're like 20 at that time. Is that like what's going on here? Like, you just can't get your head around what's going on.
Yeah, because you're trying to focus and like help as much as you can and be involved as much as you can and make this album with the biggest band in the world. Making album 3 now, and in some of the most iconic studios like Abbey Road and Air Studios and places like that. and that all that's kind of going on, but you're just kind of focused on making sure you're doing your job and the band are happy and everything's working as it should do. And then, there's a room full of celebrities, of people that are proper high end celebrities. I mean, I met Oasis before anybody had heard of them, so it's to me that was just like hanging out with your mates. But when you see like the other celebrities in the room who aren't your mates, who you see on TV every day, on films, and these like A-list celebrities, it's kind of like mental at that young age that you're sat there having a drink with these people after work in the studio, or now you're partying with these people. And that became, for 7 months, that was my life, going to wherever with Liam or with whoever, to the pub and hanging out with these like A-list celebrities, and they were the ones that coming back to the studio. And if we went round to Liam's house, they were the ones at Liam's house. So yeah, it just became normal life for 7 months. And my hotel room was the party room, because I was kind of lowest rung on the ladder. So it was like everyone else could go to bed when they'd had enough, but my room was the party room, so everyone was in mine. So I could only go to bed when the last person left, which was obviously Liam every time. So yeah, so it's yeah, great times. I mean, just all happened so fast. I just took it in my stride at that age, because you're young, you're not really, everything's going 100 miles an hour. And I didn't really stop and think at the time how mental that was at that age, to be part of that, because to me it was just my job, and I'd already worked with them, and this is what it was like now. This is what it was like for them. And I was used to working with other big bands, but not on that level, with that level of kind of press intrusion and stuff like that. And yeah, and that level of party, really crazy.
When they're like the biggest band in the world, do you see a lot of hangers on and people like that you won't want in the crowd?
Yeah, I mean, there's always people trying to, but like Liam would go to the pub and then bring everyone from the pub back, and so you never knew who you were going to get. But generally, the people who were there regularly, hanging out, all great people who were part of their kind of circle, really. So when we're doing What's the Story at Rockfield, Liam would bring people back, but I'd go to the pub to pick them up. And part of the reason for that was so I could make sure who was getting in the car, because they'd be like, yeah, they're all right, because I'm local in Monmouth, so I knew everybody. I'd be like, yeah, they're all right, they're all right. Forget about them, they're not coming near the place. So yeah, I would kind of be a bit quality control when it was What's the Story. But for Be Here Now, obviously it's just all these other people. But yeah, it was pretty. They had sound mates, they're sound mates, people looking out for them. A lot of cool people hanging out with them. They're not idiots. They knew who was decent. But yeah, the only time when it got a bit out of hand was when the whole pub would come back and you didn't know. And there'd obviously be some idiots among that.
Yeah. You mentioned like the press intrusion of the fans was mental. Is there a particular incident that sticks out to you that was just crazy?
Well, there was, yeah, I mean, there was times when, I'd kind of, have to be holed up in a hotel room, as if I was Liam, so that the press would all think that he was in the hotel room. So I'd have to sit in there ordering food, endless drinks, and kind of staying up very late, making lots of noise, so that so the press are kind of camped outside, with and where there's kind of, I'm the diversion while there's something else going on. That was pretty mental. Yeah, and just things like we had a security guard who beat himself up and claimed that he claimed that he'd got rid of some people trying to get into the studio, and because he was such a good security guard, maybe he could now come and work for them and things like that. And then the studio just checked the CCTV, and you could see the guy just beating himself up. He didn't, and but like there's kind of mental instances, and yeah, there was times when there was a time when I got to meet like people who would come to the studio. So George Martin turned up one day, and I was there just doing monitor mixes. The band weren't there, and he asked me. He said, "Oh, it's all right if I show do obviously the Beatles, and I'm like, your studio, George, you do, you know, you do what you want. He's like, all right, I'll see you later then. And later on, he knock on the door, and it's him. He's like, all right, if we come in now, and I'm like, yeah, of course. And he comes in with Jim Carrey, and Jim Carrey's girlfriend at the time was an actress, I think. It might have been Lucy Liu, I think, and another load of people, and they all come in, and then so we have a walk around the studio from Sir George Martin, me and Jim Carrey. I'm like, I'm coming on this little tour with you, Jim, and he's like, yeah, right, because Jim was asking me about Oasis and how it was going and what they were like, and and things like that, and then me and Jim Carrey just got shown around the studio by Sir George, and he's saying, "Oh, this is where I put Lennon. I put this mic on him, and this is where we put Ringo for this song, and this is how we did this." And me and Jim Carrey just looking at each other, going, "This is unbelievable." We're like, two massive Beatles fans, and we're being told that some of the techniques and how they did this record and what mic was on it, and he's looking at my mic setup and going, "Oh yeah, that's the mic I used, when we did this, and that's the mic I used when we did that." And oh yeah, we put George's amp over there, and he had the Vox as well, and me and Jim Carrey just looking at each other, mouths open, going, and Jim Carrey thought it was weird, Jim Carrey is blown away, and I'm like. I said to him, "How do you think it's for me? I'm with Jim Carrey being shown around by George Martin. You're just with some guy you've never heard of from Wales, but this is just ridiculous, And that time, Jim Carrey's like, with those Pet Detective and kind of Mask and those films, he's one of the biggest actors in the world, And so yeah, it was just things like that happened, almost definitely on a weekly basis, if not on a daily basis.
That's crazy. You've had some
Yeah.
experiences, haven't you? That's mental.
Yeah. They're all in the book. The book's
You doing a
come in.
book?
Yeah, the book's come in. It's mental. It's
Oh,
mental. A lot of bands I work with, they always asking me about the stories and asking about that, and they're all like, they can't wait to finally get all these stories in one place. And there's hundreds they don't know about, But yeah, so that's coming. Hopefully this year. I've been saying that for the last few years, but I have so little time because we're so busy in the studios and with the label and stuff that writing a book is kind of, it's kind of takes a back seat really. But it's also my career is still ongoing. I'm still busy as ever. I'm still, I'm only 48, so there's still a few years left. So it kind of doesn't feel like I need to write a book to end a chapter or to end a career, So the book's kind of ongoing. Every time I think I'm finished, another mad, crazy thing happens, and it's got to go in the book. So it's kind of a bit ongoing. But it's called From Britpop to Flip Flop. I'm kind of known for wearing flip flops, which is why my record label is called Flip Flop Records. Because I always wanted to live in Spain, I always wanted to end up in Spain, and now, fortunately, I do live in Spain. I still travel back to work when I have the studios, but we have studios in Spain and we have studios in Wales as well. So yeah, I finally got to fulfill my ambition of moving to Spain and hanging out in my flip-flops all the time. So the book was about that period of the journey from when I started in Britpop to how I ended up in Spain and everything that happened in between, from the early years of Britpop to in Spain in my flip-flops. So, and kind of Flip Flop Records now, and that's taking on a nice life of its own. So yeah, that'll be it's nearly finished. But as I say, things keep happening and more crazy stories keep coming in. Yeah, and there's a lot of interest in it because of the bands that are in it. Obviously, I've worked with some of the biggest bands in the world as well as just the UK. But yeah, there's all the other bands and all the other crazy stories. The Darkness and the Bruce Springsteen and there's Michael Jackson stories and there's all these things in it. And so it's it's gonna be a good read. I think everyone's favourite chapter is all about my dog though, Kenny Dalglish. So, I mean, the dog's mental, the most rock and roll dog ever that ever walked the planet. So I think when someone's kind of reading a few things, you always know when they're reading the Ken chapter because that's when they're laughing the hardest. So yeah, my dog's chapter.
Why is this a dog now or from back in the day?
He passed away 4 years ago. So yeah, Kenny Dalglish. So he was around from about 2000, and we had him about 2008.
Oh,
So he was around till 2020. So Yeah, he saw a lot. He went everywhere, absolutely everywhere, to every studio, he went to gigs, he went to all sorts. He ended up with his own dressing room at a Bruce Springsteen concert once, and which is a long story. Iconic rock and roll dog, and actually. Kenny Dalglish was my hero growing up. I wanted to be a footballer, a massive Liverpool fan. And Kenny Dalglish was my hero, and so that's why I called him Kenny Dalglish. And Kenny Dalglish got to hear all the stories recently about Kenny. Through his son Paul, we have a mutual friend, and so Paul got to read the stories, sent them to his dad. So I'm hoping we're going to get to chat about about little Kenny Dalglish at some point.
Yeah, it'd be brilliant. I look forward to the book then when it does come out, and it sounds brilliant.
Yeah. Well, when we do that, we'll come back on and chat about the book and some stories from the book.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So we've be here now. On the day, it was like everybody was queuing up and everything. What were you? What were you doing that day? The day it came out.
The day it came out, I was back in the studio on another session working with someone else, and it was the anticipation because obviously you've put all this work in, you know what it's like, and seeing the hysteria and like the cues and stuff, the excitement and the buzz. And for me, I'm like, this is going to break the record for the fastest selling album of all time in the first week. And so little things like that, even though for me it's not as big an achievement for me personally as it is for the band, but to just be involved in records like that when they do have those kind of achievements. So you're really excited and seeing it all, and sense of pride in you had a hand in making this record that is now becoming this just steamrolling through the British music scene, the worldwide music scene. Yeah, it was great. But for me, I was just in the studio. It was another day. You kind of head down. You're working with a different band. Obviously, the band. I can't remember who I was working with, but you're just getting on making their record. But kind of all they were interested in was Be Here Now coming out, and how massive an occasion it was. I mean, that day was just, it's on absolutely every news outlet, and as we had been on every news outlet every day when we were making it as well. So my mum would regularly see me coming out of Abbey Road with the band on the BBC 6 o'clock news, when that was making the news every day. Liam Gallagher buys a pint of milk, Oasis heading out of the studio, Oasis leave Abbey Road. It's on the news every night, and you're kind of walking out the studio there, and your mum's just sitting having her tea going, there's my son, there he is. Nice to know what he's up to.
What do you think of the whole reunion then? Are you going to be going?
Yeah, I'll go, yeah. I mean, it's been I know it's been going on so long. Will they, won't they? Everyone desperate for them to get back together, or should they get back together, or should they leave it as you kind of always think one day it would probably happen. It's too big for it not to happen, and people have different reasons of why maybe one day they change their mind. And great. I mean, just to see, it's great for guitar music for a start, for producers and engineers like myself who are involved. I still predominantly make music like I did back then. It's about getting the band together in a room, capturing the energy, the camaraderie between a band, the songs, recording everything organically, real instruments, not trying not to do too much editing, all that kind of stuff. So I'm still making records like that in studios that are conducive to making records like that. So when a band of that status gets back together and creates this movement again amongst young musicians and young bands, I got nieces and nephews, and my friends' nieces and nephews, they now want to be in a band. They absolutely love Oasis. They're all teenagers, and they're obsessed with them. And it's like me being obsessed with the Beatles when I was a teenager, and there was this band, and unfortunately the Beatles could never get back together because of John. But I think for all these young people to be able to witness this band now playing those songs is great, and it's going to be great for British music, guitar music, rock and roll. Just seeing the reaction of all ages at Liam's tour last year for Definitely Maybe tour. three generations of one family in tears, crying, hugging each other, singing every word in front of me. I just, and what it meant to people. Three generations. There's one family. We're just crying. People were singing every word in each other's faces. People they'd never met in their lives before, you don't go to many gigs where that happens.
Oh,
And so now it's Oasis. It's going to be another level up from that. And I mean, from the first minute it started, Liam's gig on that tour, it was just an amazing moment, an amazing feeling, and every hair standing up, and it just kicked off. Into the venues. I don't know if you got a chance to go to any of the shows, but it just kicked off big time in a most amazing way, and it's just going to be another level when Oasis stand up there, strike that first chord. It's just going to be. I don't think we're going to see anything like it really, and that's why it kind of had to happen, didn't it? So it's great, and yeah, I'll get to be there and see it, and yeah, I just can't wait for it really.
yeah. Well, I didn't get a ticket, but sort of a thing. But it will be a brilliant experience for anybody who's going. Like, unbelievable.
Yeah, 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 and they'll be as good as any band that can get up there and do it. They've got those songs, the charisma. I'm sure it's going to just be amazing, and it's nice that a band like that are doing gigs that big and that iconic and selling that many tickets in this area rather than all the pop concerts we've had for the last few years that create that kind of hysteria. This has surpassed all that now. We can get all that nonsense out of the way and get back to having a proper rock and roll band ruling the touring circuit. Yeah, it's up there. Just shows. I mean, that demand for tickets just shows you what they mean to people, and that maybe it also shows the lack of proper rock stars nowadays and proper rock and roll
Yeah,
bands.
yeah.
Maybe, but I also think that it shows what an effect it had on a generation that has passed down to their kids and another generation, and the success of their solo careers and those songs. Those songs. Who else has got those songs that 30 years later every age group wants to sing? Whether it's your nan in the kitchen singing them or young kids singing them, they all want to sing them. They all sing them. They all know them. My wife goes out singing, and when she sings an Oasis song, the whole pub's standing up, going mental. Not many bands have that effect many years later.
I'm
So can't wait for them. Can't wait.
I'm sure you've seen it as well over the years working in music that guitar music's just gone under the radar now, hasn't it? Well, up
Yeah,
until now, really, but for a
yeah. For
long
a while,
time.
yeah, for a while, it's a bit stale, and I think the quality. There's so. I mean, I work with so many good young indie bands and guitar bands, and there's obviously a few really good ones out there who've done quite well and are quite big, but I think they just get overshadowed by the kind of, I call it the entertainment world, not the music business. Those kind
Yeah.
of the big pop stuff, which is all about entertainment and numbers, and music kind of is a bit of a second thought. Um, but like with so many great bands, guitar bands that don't get a look in because they just don't get the support from the labels. And they're kind of, I think, driven into indie pop world, and they don't necessarily want to be an indie pop world, but it's the way they think is the only chance they can get on the radio is to go down the kind of indie pop route rather than just making rock and roll and being true to themselves. And the radio stations don't want to play it, don't want to know. So yeah, it's been a bit out in the wilderness. Still so many great bands around. I wouldn't go as far as saying there's no good bands around because that's not true. There's so many, and I work with a lot of them. But yeah, it's been overshadowed really. So now to put British guitar music at the forefront again, that everyone talking about it, and it be such a massive event and a massive thing. Um, Hopefully, this is the start of another wave now of great British rock and roll bands. But yeah, you won't get any. I don't think you'll ever see anyone have an impact as big as Oasis again. I don't think so.
Well, you was part of that great Brit pop scene when all these bands were coming through. Did you record a version of Urban Hymns that never came out?
Yeah, yeah. So Owen Morris, obviously, you'd produced the previous albums for the Verve. Um, he got the gig to produce Urban Hymns, and by this point he was using Rockfield all the time, and they wanted to go to Rockfield. So and doing all Owen's engineering, so I was working on all his albums with him. And yeah, they came in and we did urban hymns, but it didn't have like Bittersweet Symphony on it. And there was a couple of songs that were knocking about that didn't end up on urban hymns, but ended up on Richard's solo records and stuff. So it was a slightly different version of the album. And obviously, production wise, it was a lot more raw. And the arrangements were a bit longer, and the tempo's a bit slower, and it was a bit more kind of like the previous Verve records, where a bit kind of more like late night jams, kind of in the songs. And yeah, really, I mean, great raw. I thought it was a great album then. Great. I kind of, they ended up re-recording it for various reasons, because Nick McCabe rejoined the band. He wasn't in the band on the version that we did. So when he rejoined, they re-recorded it, and they re-recorded it with someone else, and went a lot more commercial sounding, a lot more commercial arrangements, which again, that's one of the biggest albums by a British band of all time as well. But yeah, there is that version of the album that they did with me and Owen in Rockfield, in the same studio. There's 2 studios at Rockfield, in the Coach House as well, same as What's the Story, Morning Glory, which was the same studio pretty much for most of that Britpop stuff and indie stuff of the 90s. Was mainly the Coach House studio. Yeah, so that full version of the album is there, it exists, and still great, because Owen's on fire at that point, and he's pushing the bands to get results and a lot of late night recording. So it's kind of a bit more kind of earthy performance wise and that kind of stuff. Great version of the album.
Another great pop album was Ash's 1977 that you did as well. What was that time like?
Crazy. We're all the same age, so they were still at school. Obviously, I'd had to leave school to do the job. They were doing their A levels, and I would have been doing my A levels. Yeah, we just became mates. Great times with them. Crazy because they were just quite like, a bit like myself, naive to the music business because they were new to it, and all of a sudden they're elevated to this status of working with this big producer in one of the biggest studios in the world, but they took it in their stride. They were just full of energy and young, hungry musicians who happened to have a great selection of songs. Those songs were brilliant, weren't they? Great catchy tunes, and the way he sang them. Yeah, it was mental again. Like Owen introduced them to drinking and smoking and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, they were like, pretty wild, some pretty wild nights went on during that session. But again, another album that you're making and you're thinking, this is going to do amazing. You can't have songs like they've got on 1977 and it not be a massive hit. So you're kind of thinking, and Owen's just capturing it perfectly. And, a lot of direction because they're young and they're inexperienced. But, I mean, they were switched on. Tim Wheeler switched on, clever guy, great in the studio. Even at that young age, just was on it, and Mark and Rick, just funny guys, and obviously talented as well. So yeah, I knew that was going to be a success. Hearing those songs go down, it's just amazing.
They're still a pretty underrated band as well, aren't they, Ash? Really?
Yeah, they're still going now, and obviously, because you look back at those albums they made. There's 3 or 4 albums. Not many bands make 3 or 4 really. They've made all their albums are great, but like big albums, iconic albums with big singles on, bands don't have nowadays. Bands can't make 3 or 4 albums like that. Not many anyway.
No.
So yeah, though, they're underrated. I mean, they sold a lot of records, and they influenced a lot of bands as well. They influenced a lot of young people and a lot of young guitar players, and and they had similar influences to me. Like Tim was a big Teenage Fanclub fan, so he was a fan of Raymond McGinley, the guitarist from Teenage Fanclub, and then I went on to work with Teenage Fanclub, another creation band.
They're underrated.
So yeah,
aren't they?
One of my favorite bands and one of the best bands I've ever worked with musically, as people, as songwriters. Just great fun in the studio, lovely people, just and so talented, really underrated. Yeah, because they didn't, apart from maybe with Grand Prix the commercial success was there, but with the others they didn't have the commercial success. But people who know music and people who are into music know what a great band they were. I mean, it was what Dave Grohl said, they wouldn't have been in Nirvana without Teenage Fanclub. You know, those songs. He loved them. One of his favorite bands. Kurt loved them. They toured together. I think when Nevermind came out, I think Teenage Fanclub, Rolling Stone voted Teenage Fanclub album of the year and Nevermind #2, I think. And then they went on a tour. Then they went on tour together. And obviously for Nirvana, it went commercially and a massive success. And Teenage Fanclub never had that success, but just shows you that people like that, the respect they have for Teenage Fanclub, just shows you what great band they are. You know, songwriters and people as well.
What do you think it is about? Like you say that with Ash, they released 4 great albums, but still pretty underrated. What do you think it is that makes, if the music's good, but they're still not rated highly, why do you think that is? If you know,
I guess maybe because the music doesn't pass necessarily into the next kind of whatever the next big thing is, or generational. You know, I think now bands are discovering bands like Ash, and people are talking about 1977 to me a lot because they're going back and realizing what a great album it was, and they're just discovering it for the first time. But I think it probably didn't have the crossover into the next kind of whatever was the next big thing. You know, we had Coldplay and all that come along, and the Kooks and bands like that. And then, so I think maybe it just didn't pass down to the next generation, to the next, like, kind of same as Stone Roses did, and maybe Oasis did. Maybe it just didn't resonate as much. I'm not sure, you know, because at the time they had the commercial success, the number ones, the sales in the millions, you know. But I'm not sure why that is with some bands. It happens. Some bands, I mean, they've got cult status. They're iconic bands, you know, of that period. They're one of the biggest bands and best bands of that period, as our Teenage Fanclub. But, you know, those bands are still making great records today. It's just we're in an industry that won't champion it, won't talk about it, radio stations that won't play it, you know. So it's a lot harder for people to discover them unless other musicians talk about it, or producers, or their parents talk about it. But then the kids don't always want to be into the same music as their parents like. You know, you didn't want to like the same music as your parents. It's just what happens. But there's certain bands that when they listen to, they go, actually, I love that, and they get it. And Ashes and Teenage Fanclub are one of those bands, I think. But yeah, it's just became an industry that doesn't talk about those bands, doesn't champion it. You know, it's not interested, which is a shame, really, I think.
do you think with like Oasis as well, like you mentioned, the press were trying to get into the studio, there was this big carnage going on, that adds to the hype? Like, people get into the band for that side of things as well, like the chaos.
Yeah, I mean, bands. Yeah, they used to. People would, you know, get in a band before to be a rock and roll star. You just didn't necessarily have to be any good. You just wanted to be a rock and roll star, and you'd kind of find your feet. Now it's very difficult to be a rock and roll star, and that chaos to be around. You know, everyone's got a mobile phone. Everyone, the press, willing to jump on anything. The social media culture of everyone being cancelled for anything remotely ridiculous. So it's very difficult to be in a rock and roll band now and be relevant, but also not get cancelled and not upset everyone. So I mean, they strike an amazing balance at it, and for Liam to still be how he is and say what he says and do what he does and be as iconic and be as big a rock star as he is an amazing achievement in itself nowadays. Yeah, so maybe that pull isn't there as much anymore for youngsters, for teenagers to, you know, they can't that rock and roll angst. Maybe, I mean, no, it's not as maybe it's not as glamorous as it was. The money's not there in the industry. All the bands are struggling. It's really hard to keep a band going now because the industry's just ignoring them, and it costs so much to tour, and it costs so much to record, and it's a lot of pressure on bands. They have to spend so much time with their social media and doing everything themselves because there's no record company support and management support. So it's really, really hard to be in a band, and it's why a lot of bands don't stand a chance or stay the course, really. it's the last decadent period of the music business was for artists and bands like that I'm associated with was the 90s. That was the last decadent period. Now all the money's at the top end and in the 1%, and the rest have nothing. It's very difficult to be a band like Oasis again nowadays, and for that to happen. Yeah, thank God there were no mobile phones around in the 90s, really.
Well,
Yeah.
to finish off, I've got a few questions like, what is musically your favourite album you worked on, and what is your favourite moment in the studio where you've watched somebody perform something before? Like you said about Ready before.
Yeah. I think I get asked this question a lot about what is my favorite album and my favorite album to work on. I mean, is kind of different things, and it does change actually. Like I loved working on Howdy by Teenage Fanclub because I'd loved that band before, and then getting to work with them and making that record, and it's up there with some of their best. And it was meeting them, so that was one of the best records for me that I worked on. But and then most enjoyable stuff with the Beta Band was the most enjoyable probably because they're the most creative band I've worked on. And then there's lots of albums I've done which have been amazing with bands that people have not really heard of, but I think it always goes back to What's the Story, Morning Glory. Second Coming, obviously special, and one of the first records to be involved in. But I think I'll never be part of anything like What's the Story again, and we might not ever see anything like that again. So, and because it was relatively easy as a session goes, how fast it was, hearing these songs, a band at that point in their career absolutely smashing it, going to go to a whole new level. I think it has to be my favorite record to work on, because of what it's done for my career and what it means to people. There's seeing people like at the gigs, like I say, crying when they're playing those songs, and seeing, I don't know, just being part of that. It's just it's special, and it's something that I'll have with me forever. And also, it's the most successful album I've worked on. So it's, for that reason, I'd have to say it's that album. And in terms of moments in the studio, like I said, there was the Rennie like moments when I was watching him. There was watching Liam do the vocal to Champagne Supernova. I mean, that's just etched in there. I can tell you what I was wearing. I can tell you where I was standing. This moment of these mouths kind of in the room, just look at each other, going, what we just witnessed. So things like that. But I suppose, I mean, I was I work with rock bands as well, and there's a band called Thunder I work with who I was a massive fan of when I was a kid, and they're still best mates of mine. I still work with them now after 30 years, and they're still a big band and important in rock music. And I think I did an album with them with covers, and getting to record some songs that meant so much to me as a 14-year-old. And then being in a room where we did an album of acoustic versions of the same songs, of these songs that I'd grown up with. And so I think sitting there now recording songs that had meant a lot to me as a kid and got me into playing guitar, I think those kind of moments are up there. But still, my favorite moment in a studio was getting to produce Bruce Springsteen and standing on the other side of the glass from Bruce Springsteen directing. I was only about 26. I'm still young at this point. And we have like a lot of banter in the studio, and all of a sudden my banter's with Bruce Springsteen, and it's kind of like, and you're making a record. And I think having him standing in front of you playing that iconic guitar, his Telly, and just chatting with him and making music and learning off him, that's the biggest moment, I think, for me in a studio.
What, that was in America, wasn't it?
It was, in New York, in the Hip Factory, in Sony Studios,
Was it a good experience then, that, like crazy?
Yeah, crazy, yeah.
What was he like? Was he a nice guy in that?
Oh, one of the best. I mean, it's only a few days, and but yeah, he's a big fan of a guitar player called Dave Edmonds, who started out at Rockfield and was on the Rockfield label, and he's a big fan of his. So he's a big fan of Rockfield and all the records that were done there in the 60s and 70s. So he was just quizzing me about all these people from the 60s and 70s and what's the studio like and what's Dave Edmunds like. Um, yeah, so immediately we had something to talk about. And Rockfield again was that kind of connection, as it is so many times. So yeah, sat there do lots of stories with him about that. But yeah, watching someone that level at work in the studio, those kind of all-time greats are all-time greats for a reason. It's usually because they're a bit special in the studio. And yeah, and he was amazing musician, human being, so it was yeah, that's, and it's something, it was out of I was used to bands coming in, and okay, yeah, okay, Led Zeppelin's up there, so Robert Plant would regularly come into Rockford, so I'd meet him regularly, and people of that level. But it was always kind of like bands and indie bands, and it was normal to me. It was everyday life. It's what I did, and it was at Rockfield, so those people. But I think that was something completely outside of that. That was like in one of the biggest studios in America with one of the biggest artists that's ever been in America. So yeah, that was a different, like out of my comfort zone almost as well, and still not being that old. Great experience just to be part of that. It's another moment where you go, this is going to stick with me forever now. This is part of my career now. This moment here, this is like, I've worked with Bruce Springsteen, and that's one of those moments really. So yeah, you kind of enjoy it, soak it all up. But everything's still going at 100 miles an hour. You're on to your next session straight after it. You've just come off another session, and while you're in the studio, you're focused. You've got a ton of it. So it does kind of just go 100 miles an hour past you. So you have to try and stop and enjoy the moment and remember the moment.
Well, you mentioned one of the great musicians. You mentioned before Michael Jackson as well. Did you nearly work with him or something?
No, it's so yeah. There's a couple of he's in the book a couple of times actually for various reasons. And no, he was actually in the studio when I was there with Bruce Springsteen. He was in the same studio
Oh, right.
working. Yeah. So yeah, it was just amazing. I'm working this. Michael Jackson was in the studio one. I was in the second floor with Bruce Springsteen. On three was P Diddy. So hot topic of conversation. And, I was in a lift with P Diddy for a brief time there, and but nothing happened. And and then on four was Elton John. So I mean, I was like, what a studio! This is like, I've gone from Rockfield, which is like, big bands in all the time, but this was like another level. I'm like, this is just royalty in this building now, and being for a short period, being part of that studio and that kind of setup when, yeah, Michael Jackson's coming past, and it's just bonkers. You're a young kid.
Did you say on to him?
Only hello. That was it, So you couldn't really get near him, but you'd see him when I was like coming out, wherever he was coming in the studio, and yeah, didn't get to see much of him really. So yeah, but I was a big Michael Jackson fan, and one of the best performers that ever lived. So yeah, crazy times just to be part of that, and then you've got to keep all yourself together because you're about to go into the studio and record Bruce Springsteen, which is nerve-wracking enough, but then you've just kind of said hello to Michael Jackson in the corridor, and it's like, and those studios are great and their engineers are good, and so all eyes are on you because why is this young kid from Wales the guy? Why is he working with Bruce Springsteen? Why is he here? Why? So you kind of got that pressure on you because you're out of your comfort zone. You're not in Rockfield. You're not, around your everyday people, and yeah, so the pressure is there. But I think because I was with some pretty big people from a young age at Rockfield from 16, you're hanging out with your Liams and your Ian Browns and people like that. I think I was kind of like just took it in my stride because it was just another day in the office.
Was it at Abbey Road where Liam smashed your guitar up?
Yes. Yeah, in the studio too at Abbey Road.
Noel gave you his Wonderwall guitar, didn't he, as a replacement? Yeah. Have you got any other like these special what would memorabilia kind of things? Any other stuff?
Yeah. I've got Manny's bass behind me in the rack there from the Second Coming.
Oh, really?
Yeah, his bass is sat there right behind me. That Art Marshall amp there was from 1977 from the Ash album. Yeah. I've got, what else is in that rack? Griggsy's Trace Elliott bass amp down there, which was one of, I think, only 7 they made. So I've got that in the rack there as well. What else is in there that's maybe significant? A couple of the guitars there were used on the Second Darkness album. Yeah, I've got some gold discs up there as well, and some discs there, and there's some more on the other side of the. This is like my little home. This is like my little home studio. So
what are them gold discs? What albums?
I've got one here. We just talked about it. If you can see this one.
Oh yeah, it's good.
1977. Yeah, so there's a few knocking about. Yeah, I've got some tambourines of Oasis still. I did sell one for charity back a couple of years ago. I sold some football shirts, the Oasis football shirts, and a tambourine. For the proceeds went to we have a non-profit company as well that we do for kind of helping lots of young people with mental health issues and learning difficulties and stuff, getting into music and training and things like that. So we sold some of that off to go into that non-profit to help with some of those workshops. Yeah, I've got a couple of others. I've got one more from What's the Story and one tambourine from Be Here Now sessions. Yeah, a few bits knocking about. I've got all my session notes as well, because back then obviously no one had a laptop or anything, no one had a phone to make notes, so everything was written down, handwritten, and so part of my job would be to make notes on everything, and so I've got all the notes from 1977, from Second Coming, from What's the Story, from Be Here Now, from all sorts of records, all the records I was working on back then. Charlatan's record, I think, is in there. There's the Verve version of Urban Hymns and things. Yeah, loads and loads of notes from all those sessions.
What's your most prized possession you've got?
I guess it's Noel's guitar. That's the one, that's like an iconic piece of music memorabilia, really, because obviously associated with What's the Story and with Be Here Now, and what it was used on, and his MTV Unplugged and Nebworth and things like that, so it's the guitar that Johnny Depp played and stuff, so it just doesn't really get much bigger than that in terms at the moment as well. It's a iconic piece of music history, really.
I watched that little documentary he did on YouTube, and you can tell he was a bit gutted he gave it away, couldn't you?
Yeah. Because he's given away lots of guitar. Loads of people got Noel guitars. He's given away loads. We sold loads, and over the years. But yeah, that was the one. Maybe, maybe that's got a bit of significance. I mean, he probably wouldn't play that guitar. I mean, they're great for live, which is why he had it, and because he had his Gibson for in the studio, but the one he travelled around with and would take on the train and stuff was the one that he gave to me, and obviously would play live along with others that he had as well. But yeah, I think he was like, oh, that's where that went again.
So
yeah,
to finish off, what are you up to these days? Are you working with any bands at the moment? What's life like for you now?
Yeah, life is 100 miles an hour still. I'm pretty much 7 days a week making records still. We've got the 2 studios over here in Spain, so I'm doing some Spanish artists, but mainly it's still UK acts that come over here. And I'm still working at Rockfield a lot, which is busier than ever there. And we've got our own studio about half an hour from Rockfield as well. So just loads and loads of guitar bands coming through, some good bands. And then we've got the record label now, Flip Flop Records. So we're going to have a few more 90s bands. We've got Dodgy on the label now. So we're in the middle of a new album with Dodgy. I've got Max Rafferty, who was in the Kooks, so finishing an album with him, and we'll be releasing some of that stuff on the label as well. And then loads of great bands, like we've got Sahaji, known as the Japanese Oasis. If you haven't checked them out, you should check them out. And they're a bit mental, they're good. And bands like the 355s and Kitten Pyramid, and the Rogues. So some really good bands on the label. We're quite busy with that. But yeah, I'm in the studio constantly, still working with lots of artists of all levels, developing new artists, involved in grassroots music, and artist development, and still established artists that have been, quite big now, and bands from the past as well. Yeah, lots going on, non-stop it is.
You still enjoying
Yeah,
it
and we got
all?
our studios, and we're running our studios as well. So constantly getting bands into the studio. So it's big. It's a big operation at the moment.
Do you think studios and recording will always be that? I know you can do it at home now, but going into a studio, it's different, isn't it?
Yeah, it is different, and it's hard. It's became like a lot harder for studios to survive, and a lot did close down when computer recording and home recording got to a decent enough level. A lot of studios suffered, and a lot of them went. Especially kind of residential studios where you go and you stay and you eat and you stay because the properties were worth so much money and then the budgets dropped out. But I think those that hung on are now, there's few studios like that around with Rockfield so busy because there's not many big residential studios to go to. So big bands still want to go away, get away from all the craziness. They don't want to stay in hotels. They want to all be together. And I think that experience that you get being with your mates, being away, having a laugh, you can't beat it. And you don't get that making a record in your bedroom. Everybody in separate bedrooms making records and sending files. It's a way to make records, and it's made it easier and cheaper to make records, but it's nowhere near as much fun. Um, so I think studios will always be there and be relevant, and so will producers and engineers, even though a lot of bands can still make records. I just think I don't know. I think it's still the best way to make a record, having someone who can be that outside opinion on a record and can help you kind of achieve and mold your sound. And yeah, the whole experience of being in a studio. I know it's hard because of costs, and it's so much cheaper and easier to record at home, but you still got to make a great record to survive, and it's hard to do that. I think with guitar music and with bands, it's harder to do that than it is with pop music.
Yeah.
Um, so much of what made those records great was the fact that those guys were in a room together, and there's energy, and there's camaraderie, and there's that kind of buzz that you get, and you're kind of throwing ideas off each other, and that's why those records are great. That's why all those '90s records are great because they're all making records like that. No computers, all analog to tape, no computers involved, and a load of mates in a room together. And I think that transfers onto records really. Not all the time. You can still make a great record at home by yourself on a laptop, wherever. But I think that whole thing is part of making a great record still. And I think if you can sit out all the AI stuff that's come in and all the kind of home recording setups that are happening, I think if you can sit it out as a studio and a producer and engineer and just stick to what you do and how you make records, then it'll come back around. And eventually bands will want to, and labels will want bands to go back into a studio because the results are there. So yeah, it's definitely been tougher, and it's great. I mean, I can sit at home and take records away and now work on them and edit. We don't have to hire a big studio, but I think for the base of tracks and the kind of the main bulk of a track, taking a band to a studio and capturing that moment in time rather than all bits of different times of people in different places. I think capturing that moment in time is part of the whole artistic process really. And I think that's still the best way. Being able to edit and work on it afterwards, that's great, and that's brilliant for using all the tools that we have now. But I still like to get the band, take them away, capture that moment in time, get the music down, and then work on it digitally afterwards.
I guess at home as well, you've got less chance of getting whacked around the head with a cricket bat, though, haven't you?
Yeah. And I'm in Spain, the sun's shining, so I get to spend a bit more time in the sunshine and in the pool. So rather than in somewhere with no windows and not seeing any daylight, because we work long hours, in the studio. But
Yeah.
it's part of the buzz and part of what, even when the money's not great and when you're working a lot of hours and you're away from home and you may be missing the family and your kids and stuff, it's that buzz of being with these musicians in this crazy kind of big brother situation, not knowing what's going to come next, living and breathing it, and
Yeah.
that's much better than just sat at the end of a bloody laptop, like working remotely with someone, because nothing really happens working remotely over a laptop, So yeah, so it's much better. So yeah, that's I still that buzz is still there, and that's why I'm still able to do it. I think because I'm still in studios with the musicians, kind of day to day. And that buzz when you sat at a big mixing console and the band is set up in front of you and they're all playing together and the speakers are up loud. And we're off. We're making a record. This is it. That's the buzz. That's it. That's what gets you out of bed every morning, even though it's long hours. 7 days a week. That's what gets you up for it.
At the end of an album, do you kind of hate that it's finished, or are you kind of glad that you've finished it?
There's both. There's both. Sometimes you're just trying to get through. It's not always an enjoyable experience. And it's tiring. And sometimes you're kind of relieved a bit. Oh, we got there. Sometimes you think we're never going to get this finished, and we're never going to get there. It's going to go over budget. They're going to split up before the end of it. All that's going on. So sometimes you're just relieved to get to the end. But there's always that bit of, oh, everyone's off now, and you kind of, when you're living with someone as well, and you kind of get to know them really well, and it's kind of sad, and you don't know whether you're going to work with them again, or when you're going to see them again, and how good the record's going to end up and stuff. So yeah, it's a bit of both really. So sometimes there's some records you just wish you could work with certain people every day of the week, and it's just because it's just easy, it's good fun, it's good money, it's great, it's straightforward. But you need a bit of that madness and uncertainty in there as well to keep you on your toes, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you for coming on. I know you said you're busy a lot these days, so for you to take the time out, it does honestly mean a lot.
You're welcome. It's great to chat to you, mate. Really good.
It was brilliant. I really enjoyed it. Just to finish, is there anything you want to plug, or is there a link to your websites or anything that?
Where you can just, if you the new studio website will be coming first, but if you just keep an eye on Flip Flop Records, so www.flipfloprecords.com, you can go and see the bands we're working with. That label's going to grow. We're in the process of taking on loads more bands this year. The phone hasn't stopped, obviously, since the Oasis announcement and stuff. Loads of bands wanting to come onto the label, and which is great. And then if on there, the new studio website will be coming soon, so you'll be able to see the new facility we got, which is, we're keeping budgets really low to help bands out and to get bands back into the studio, help them out with budgets, help them out with costs. We do payment plans for them so they can pay monthly, so they don't have to find all the money in one go. Anything that means bands get back into the studio and can make a proper record properly with with what I've talked with, all the reasons I talked about, So yeah, just keep an eye on Flip Flop Records, and that'll have all the information about the book and stuff on it as well. So we'll keep an eye on that. And we'll maybe have a chat about the book and the Flip Flop Records bands at some point, and when that's happening.
Yeah, definitely. It would be brilliant to get back on and talk of that, because it has been a brilliant episode. I've enjoyed hearing
great
life you have lived, really, haven't you?
Yeah. Mental. Yeah, sometimes it's hard to believe, and especially when you're writing the book and you're like, if I wasn't there, I'd be like, what? You can't believe that all this is actually going on in one. Like, some of the bands I've worked with just say, it's like you've had like 40, 50 lifetimes, Brino. They're like it's like, yeah, lots of craziness. Yeah, lots of craziness.
But at the end of it, you've produced a lot of great art as well, haven't you? So
and it's there forever. It's there for my kids. My kids are getting into some of that music now, and we're kind of understanding more about what I do and my involvement in the music business and stuff. So yeah, it's nice for that to be there, to exist for them as well. It's great.
Yeah, definitely. Like I say, hopefully we'll see a resurgence in British guitar bands as well. So we'll have to see what happens there.
Well, they're there. Just people need to get out and go and see them. There's not many grassroots venues left, unfortunately, but it's the only real way to kind of discover new music is to go to a venue and watch them live, because pretty much everything else we discover is usually put in front of us by an algorithm or whatever. So to support bands and get out and see them and buy their merch and whatever you can do to help them is great. But Oasis, massive part in the resurgence of British guitar bands, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Well, like I say, Nick, thank you for your time. It's been an honour to speak to you.
You're welcome, mate. Take it easy.
Cheers. See you in a bit. Thank you.
Bye, mate. Bye.
Bye.